in Aurora, Illinois, speaking with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dennis Hastert. We're going to go back to him now. Mr. Speaker, as you look at more of these numbers coming in, and as you look at this very undecided presidential race, what are you thinking about in terms of making government work in the next few years?
Well, clearly, we have to reach across the aisle and try to do things on a bipartisan basis. I think the president, whoever he's going to be, I certainly hope it's George W. Bush, was going to have to do the same. And I think we're looking for people, and I think the American people are looking for people who are willing to bring people together and get things done. And that's what I've tried to do since I've been Speaker, and I think that's what we'll continue to do.
We've noticed a number of Democrats who work with you in the House have commented on the difference in style between you and your predecessor, Newt Gingrich. Did you go into this position deliberately wanting to be a different kind of leader in the Congress?
Well, I felt very strongly when I became Speaker that we had to prove to the American people that we could get some things done. And I talked about a better education in this country for our kids. We talked about supporting our men and women who serve this country and our national defense. We talked about balancing a budget. We talked about paying down the debt. And we talked about not taking a penny of the Social Security and Medicare Trust Fund and spending it in general revenue funds. We did those things, and especially balancing the budget, paying down the debt, and protecting Social Security. That's never been done before by any Congress. So I think that type of getting things done is what the American people wanted.
Some people have had the impression that Governor Bush, and I'm not clear on this, did not campaign or spend much time campaigning with and for Republican members of Congress. Set me straight on that. How much campaigning did he do with members of the House, members of the Senate?
Well, he actually campaigned with a lot of our members. And when he was in a district, our members were there with him, and especially our members who were vulnerable and our challengers that we needed to get out and get some recognition. He did a very good job, and we're pleased with his cooperation.
Do you agree with his characterization that there has been too much partisanship, too much just bitterness and fighting and division in the nation's capital that needs to be healed?
Well, you know, I tried to get beyond that when I became Speaker, but clearly Dick Gephardt wanted to be Speaker. He set on a policy of trying to stop everything so we would have what they called a do-nothing Congress, and try to blame that on us so that they become the majority. It didn't happen. And in spite of what those tactics were, we did get a lot of things done. And the things that we did do were done on a bipartisan basis. The marriage penalty was done on a bipartisan basis. Tax relief on death was done on a bipartisan basis. The PNTR for China was done on a bipartisan basis. The sweeping banking reform was done on a bipartisan basis. So we will continue to do that.
Well, then, does George W. Bush's characterization hold up?
Well, I think sometimes that people don't really see what goes on, but I think the president can be very helpful to us in trying to help and reach across the aisle in the House and in the Senate to try to get things done on a bipartisan basis.
Mr. Speaker, it's Jeff Greenfield. Some of your colleagues have said that the culture has changed, that there was a time when people would battle politically and then go home and have dinner together and meet each other's families, and that there was a kind of much more collegial atmosphere, and that without putting blame on one side or another, that it's become a much less civil place, that is to say the Congress of the United States. Is the closeness of this election, do you think, potentially a piece of evidence that says to people on all sides that the culture just has to change, that the sniping and the partisanship and going on television and yelling at each other with talking points is just had it?
Well, I think you've watched my performance. I haven't been on television every time you turn around. I've tried to make the House work and to bring people together to make that House work. I think that's what the American people want. A lot of the people who are shrill aren't there anymore. We've had some real changes, and some of them even lost in this election. So I think we're well on the way. I would certainly offer my hand across the aisle so we can get some things done.
Well,
but you have to realize one other thing there is a difference in philosophy between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and we do that fighting it's for philosophical differences as well.
Well, when you point out that some of the shrillness is gone and some of the bitterness has faded, perhaps that's why I'm asking this characterization that George W. Bush was talking about out on the campaign trail repeatedly, day after day during this campaign. I guess I'm asking you, does it match the reality of what you've lived with in Washington the last 2 years?
Well, it's been a tough time in Washington the last 2 years. We had a 1.2% margin of error. Anytime that 4 members or 5 members of Congress got up on the wrong side of the bed, you know, the whole balance of Congress shifted. So, you know, we had to work hard to keep our people together, to move an agenda for the American people, a better agenda for our children and our grandchildren. It was tough to do, but, you know, we didn't lose many votes.
Mr. Speaker, today in talking with one of the people around Vice President Gore, he said if the Vice President wins, he made a bold prediction and said the Patient's Bill of Rights will pass in a lame duck session of Congress. Is that the way you see it, if the election were to fall to the Vice President?
Well, you know, we passed a Bill of Rights for patients in the House. We passed one in 1998. And,
well, he's clearly
talking
about the one the Democrats preferred.
Well, we'll see.
All right, Mr. Speaker, we appreciate your joining us from Aurora, Illinois. It's late there, or I should say early there in the morning. It's early here, but we all want to keep a close watch on these results. Thank you very much.
Maybe not so early in the morning before I had time we see how all this works out. So it's good to be with you.
Are you hearing anything we're not hearing?
No, it's just pretty. We're waiting for Florida.
All right. Dennis Hastert, the Speaker of the House. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Judy, that conversation you had with the Speaker should remind us of a word that has not been heard for a very long time: impeachment. I mean, to think that a presidential election could have been conducted about a year and a half or a little less than 2 years after the president was impeached, amazing. Bernard Shaw, sir?
We have a call. Let's go out to the Show Me State, Missouri, in that Senate race in which a dead man, Governor Mel Carnahan, is on the ballot. CNN is calling this for Mel Carnahan. His widow, as you know, agreed to run. And Mel Carnahan, his memory, and those who support him have defeated, turning out Senator John Ashcroft, a first-term Republican senator. What a development. Kate Snow, let's go quickly to Kate Snow in St. Louis.
Bernie, I think you can hear the crowd here. They've got CNN on in the background, and with your announcement, a lot of excitement here. Mrs. Carnahan spoke to this crowd just a short time ago. She talked about carrying on the fire, carrying on her husband's dreams. She, of course, has not been very public in this whole campaign. In fact, voters here in Missouri only saw Mrs. Carnahan a very few times throughout this race over the last 3 weeks since the death of her husband. They saw her in one ad that aired on local television here. They saw her in her announcement last week when she decided that, yes, she would take the position if the votes were to go to her husband. But other than that, they haven't seen much of Mrs. Carnahan. She is right now at home with 2 of her daughters in Rolla, Missouri. That's about an hour and a half south of where we are in St. Louis. This race has been close all night long. Senator John Ashcroft just a short time ago telling his supporters that they could go home now, that he would have more news for them in the morning. We don't expect to hear from him again anytime soon. Again, very good news for the Democrats here in Missouri, especially in light of the fact that George W. Bush seems to have won this battleground state. Bernie?
Kate, even though she didn't campaign per se that much, she did put up one ad, did she not, within the past 7 days?
She did. Last week, she started running one ad where she talked straight into the camera, a very personal kind of ad, talking about her remembrance of her husband and talking about her goals for Missouri. She does not have a public record. She has not served in public office, but she has been very vocal about the kinds of issues that she wanted to take to Washington. She's talked about education, about women's issues, about children. She's talked about reforming Social Security and some other issues, tax cuts, targeted tax cuts. So she has said all along that she carries her husband's mantle and that she wanted to take that to Washington. Bernie?
Kate, it's Jeff Greenfield. Kate, we know that Mrs. Carnahan and the Carnahan people adopted that slogan, keep the fire going, but we've heard that some Republicans were threatening a legal challenge on the ground that a dead person is not an inhabitant of the state, which Missouri law requires. Can you tell us anything about whether they intend to pursue that legal challenge?
I've asked that question all night. They will not comment on what kind of legal challenge they might mount. But I might add, Jeff, that in addition to the constitutional question, there's been a lot of local news here tonight about the polling places and about the numbers coming in and people being allowed to vote or not allowed to vote. The Republicans voicing some concerns. They say that they think there has been some potential fraud here in St. Louis, in the city of St. Louis. You'll recall that they kept the polls open a little bit late tonight because a judge earlier in the day, a state judge, ruled in favor of the Democrats, who had argued that they needed a little more time because some of their folks hadn't been able to vote. There's been a lot of back and forth today about whether there were any irregularities. I would expect that we might hear more about this tomorrow. Jeff?
Kate, are the Carnahan people banking on the fact that when this woman goes to Washington, Senate Republicans have already indicated the obvious, that they control the rules and the seating in the Senate? Are the Democrats and the Carnahan supporters banking on the fact that who is going to throw a widow out of the Senate seat? Who's going to refuse to seat this woman?
I'm sorry, I can't hear the last part of your question.
Are the Carnahan supporters banking on the fact that it's unlikely the Republicans would want to take on all the public relations heat if they would not let this woman take this seat?
Bernie, it's too loud in here. I'm sorry. I just simply can't hear
Well,
you.
we'll call timeout, and we'll call timeout, and thank you in that cheering ballroom. Judy?
All right, we've, as Bernie said, we've called Missouri for the late Governor Carnahan, and as Bernie's been pointing out and as Kate's been discussing, it is his widow who has said that she will accept the seat if appointed. Let's go over to our balance of power area to Wolf Blitzer for some examination of this and some other Senate, House, and governor's races. Wolf.
Judy, with the call for the late Mel Carnahan to be the winner in Missouri, let's take a look at the balance of power in the Senate as it now stands. Coming into this evening, there were 35 Republican holdovers, 31 Democratic holdovers. The Republicans so far tonight have won 14 Senate seats. The Democrats have won 17 seats. That brings the new number of Republicans with 49 seats. The Democrats now have 48 seats. There are still three undecided seats that we'll talk about in a moment. But only a little while ago, before this call by CNN in favor of Mel Carnahan, Mrs. Jean Carnahan did speak out. She had some emotional words on a speakerphone. I want you to listen to what she had to say a little while ago.
Lincoln never saw his nation made whole again. Susan B. Anthony never cast a vote. Martin Luther King Jr. never finished his mountaintop journey. My husband's journey was stopped short, too. And for reasons we don't understand, the mantle has now fallen upon us. We remain heirs of a legacy, bearers of the dream. On this night, I pledge to you, rather, let us pledge to each other, we will never let the fire go out. God bless you always. Thank you.